and he is on vacation, and he graciously agreed to take time to do this. And he didn't want to spend an hour. He said it's about half an hour to give his presentation. Frida Wallison from Pitkin County is joining. Welcome, Frida.
Hi.
Hi, welcome, Frida. So we're going to let Matt start his presentation because he's on vacation. He agreed to do this while he's on vacation. We scheduled this in part because it's just about a week before the committees, the redistricting committees hold their hearings in, I believe, it's in Montrose and Mesa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so this would give people an opportunity to digest what we go through tonight and prepare their remarks. So Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we have your screen.
Oh, thank you very much, Maurice, and thank you everyone for joining this evening.
I was trying to get this going.
I might have everyone, and I just lost everyone.
You're sharing.
You're good.
Okay. Can you see my redistricting?
Well, listen, you.
Okay.
Mute you.
There we go. Okay. So here's the current map. Every 10 years by law, we have to engage in redistricting. So I'm focusing tonight on the House and Senate maps, predominantly though the House for the state legislature here in Colorado. 1 week from tomorrow, the commission will be on the Western Slope. They'll be making stops in Montrose, Grand Junction, and Carbondale. Carbondale will be on Saturday, July 31st. I do want to highlight right away at the start, it's really important if you want to testify in person, you must sign up by tomorrow. You're required to sign up 1 week in advance, but I'll get to that at the end. I just wanted to highlight that at the very beginning. So this is the current map. I represent House District 54. It's the pink area in the middle of the Western Slope.
In progress.
So what is redistricting and how did we get here? So we passed Amendment Z, which concerns the state legislative maps. We have Amendment Y, which concerns the congressional maps, but I'm only going to talk about the state maps here. This is where you can find it in the state constitution. Redistricting is one of those things that has been highly political all throughout history. I mean, the term gerrymandering came from Massachusetts when Eldridge Gerry, one of our founding fathers, who was an early governor of Massachusetts, tried to redo the districts in such a way to only benefit one political party, and it kind of looked like a salamander, so they called it gerrymandering. In 1964, the US Supreme Court held in Reynolds against Sims that the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution demands that legislative representation be relatively equal from one district to another. So that's why in 1964, there's a significant change that occurs if you look at Colorado legislative maps. I have some historic maps, but they begin in 1980. So for the purposes of this, that's as far back as we're going to go. But just know that prior to 1964, every county had their own state representative, and then about every 2 counties had a state senator here in Colorado. This changed starting in 1966. So you'll see from 66 to 1970, we really didn't know what we were doing. And then in 1970, we tried to tie districts still to county lines. So from Amendment Z, we have an independent redistricting commission. There's 12 members, even number of Rs, Ds, and Us. Of course, this doesn't really mean it's nonpartisan. All it means is that people got onto the commission based on a lottery of factors. So you couldn't be an elected official, former elected official, party leader. You had to apply and your name was drawn out of a hat, essentially. What really concerns me is the 2 members on the Legislative Redistricting Commission. One is from Steamboat Springs, one is from Aspen. Both are the 2 Democrats, or I should say 2 of the Democrats on the committee. That to me is quite concerning. We also have 2 recent graduates from CU Boulder who came out of different states. They're relatively new to the state. One is a Republican, one is unaffiliated. This is also a bit concerning to me because they don't necessarily know the history of the state or the geography or the culture. And I'm going to emphasize geography and culture quite a bit in this presentation because the commission does not want to hear about, we've always done it this way, so therefore we should continue to do it this way. I find that a persuasive argument. That's probably from being a lawyer in my background before I became a legislator. So precedent is really important. What the commission wants to know is, why is it that a group of people should stay together going into the future? And that's really important to keep in mind. So they're wanting to talk about communities of interest. They're wanting to talk about compactness, and they're wanting to talk about, is this going to be a competitive seat? So those are the three things they're really looking for. The commission must approve the maps by September 15th, and that must be sent to the state Supreme Court. The Supreme Court can only review whether or not the Constitution was followed, not whether they like the map or not. Currently, the independent commission has asked for an interrogatory from the state Supreme Court asking to set aside the dates in the Constitution. I will say, as a legislator, we actually tried to do this during the session and the Supreme Court slapped our hand, although I will say I voted against it. They slapped the General Assembly's hand and said, the General Assembly can't change the dates of a constitutionally created commission. It's an independent commission and therefore out of the hands of the legislature. I agreed 100% with the Supreme Court. This is probably the right move by the commission to be asking themselves. I mean, they should have never asked the legislature to ask on their behalf. They should have asked by themselves. I do hope that we have dates that are relatively soon, because the further we kick this out, the more in jeopardy we are of any sort of a legal challenge to the maps. Because if we get closer to 2022, or at least closer to the end date of November 15th of 2021, then all of a sudden there possibly could be a lot of legal challenges, in which case our independent redistricting commission might no longer be independent. So how does the current map compare to future maps? Well, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of history. We're the western slope here, so as you can look at this map, and hopefully it's pretty clear on your screen. This is what I got from our legislative staff. And this is what they did in 1982. So this is pretty low tech. They obviously did not go to great lengths to draw these maps back then. At the time, House District 54, for example, was half of Mesa County and then Western Delta County. So pretty similar to the way it is today, although the current map has Grand Junction in one district and then all of Mesa County and Western Delta County in the other district. As you can see, the district that included Pitkin County, because I see we have several from Pitkin County, is all of Pitkin County, all of Garfield County, Rio Blanco County. And then there was this interesting northwestern district that included Jackson and Grand and Routt. And then if you look down at District 58, which seems to usually center around Montrose and Telluride, it seemed to go pretty close to Cortez, it looks like. And then at the time, 59 included what looks like Durango and Cortez and Pagosa Springs. And then District 60 was the San Luis Valley. So it just kind of gives you an example of how it was from 82 to 91. And the people who would have been in office at this time would have been people like Tim Foster, would have been in 54. Actually, I'm drawing a blank on the others, but they will come to mind. So in 1992 to 2001, this is how the maps changed. As you can see, northwestern Colorado became much more compact, very similar to how it is today. Garfield, Rio Blanco, Moffett all together. And maybe Pitkin, it looks like. It's kind of hard. This is still low tech. In the 90s, you would have thought they would have had better computer illustrations. 54 looks relatively unchanged from the previous decade, so does 55. And same way with 58 and 59 and the San Luis Valley. So it's pretty unchanged here. You go from 2002 to 2011. Once again, 54, and I'm starting with 54 because I'm the current incumbent for that seat, so it's my prerogative to start there. Is relatively unchanged from the last 2 decades. In this decade, 55 is the same way. You see, all these districts look pretty similar to the way they had been the previous decades. So then here's the current map. This is where we start to see some major changes. You might ask yourself, well, why are these major changes? A switch in political parties is one of the reasons why. So the 3 decades previous to the map you're currently viewing would have seen Republicans with a lot more influence. This map sees more of a Democrat influence, so that's why you start to see some funkier shapes, especially in District 61. The rumor has it, the reason why Gunnison was cut out of this district was for the sole purpose of getting rid of Kathleen Curry, who had switched from being a Democrat to unaffiliated at the time, and it looked like she stood a good chance of winning, so they carved her out to get rid of her. They wanted to have more urban districts, so they created House District 55 to be only Grand Junction. That was to benefit Bernie Busher, who's a well-known Democrat from Grand Junction, although he spends most of his time in Denver these days. And in fact, he did win that district. We fought bitterly over District 59. So J. Paul Brown represented it. Then we had Representative McLaughlin, then J. Paul Brown, then Representative McLaughlin's wife, who is Representative McLaughlin. He recently passed away, but Barbara, his wife, still represents 59. So it definitely was starting to
I'm going to correct you real quick, Matt.
Yep.
Bernie Busher never served in this map. He was already kicked out in 2008.
Oh, thank you. I greatly appreciate that. Thank you very, very much. For some reason, I had the wrong notes, so I appreciate that. So here's the preliminary map that was released on June 29th. Hopefully all of you have seen it, and this is not the first time. So we start to see some funky things that occur. And the reason why I gave you a quick history lesson was it's important to see that on the Western Slope, and I'm not talking about the Front Range or the Eastern Plains, this presentation really is for the Western Slope. It pretty much was consistent, and we start to see some interesting changes with the preliminary map. The preliminary map, just so that everyone doesn't get too paranoid or panicked or your blood pressure worked up, was drawn by staff. So the commission has not actually weighed in on this map, and that's the importance of public comments. So whether you're making a public comment through a drawn map, written comments, or oral testimony at one of their field hearings, it's really important that you emphasize the importance of keeping communities of interest together, but also understanding history, the fact that, for example, what had been 54 has always had Western Delta County, and there's a reason for that. People flow between the two counties. There's about 1,100 people every single morning who wake up in the city of Delta, and they drive down to Mesa County for their employment. Likewise, there's about 600 people in Mesa County who wake up every morning and drive down to the city of Delta, and that's according to the US Census Office. So you might be wondering, between Delta and Montrose, there's an exchange of about 1,000 people total back and forth between the two counties. Culturally speaking, there's just a lot of similarity between Delta and Mesa counties. For example, almost all of the state's commercial orchards are in these two counties, along with most of the vineyards on the Western Slope are in these two counties. There's actually no commercial vineyards or orchards once you start to go south of any scale, at least not that would be commercially viable. Let's talk about this little nub up here. It includes Rifle, Silt, and the area south of Newcastle. So I was drawn out of my house seat because I live in Delta. Perry Will, who lives south of Newcastle, was also drawn out of his seat. This is really important for everyone to understand. It's not just about incumbents, but it's about power on the Western Slope for Republicans in the future. I'm going to tell you this, but I never want you to mention that you heard this coming from me, because the commission really wants to focus on competitive seats. But Rifle and Silt have a whole lot more in common with places like Meeker and Craig and Maybell than Glenwood Springs. And that's why one thing we're going to be making the arguments for, at least I hope to persuade you to make the arguments for, is that Glenwood Springs should be part of this Roaring Fork Valley district. And if we can make these switches here and move Glenwood to this Roaring Fork Valley district, move the Rifle and Silt area back into 57, move this area to include Western Delta County, this little switch here means that we will for sure keep Northwestern Colorado a Republican seat. Without this switch, it looks very difficult on paper for a Republican to win this seat. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it would be incredibly difficult. Even someone as likable as Perry Will, although he's been drawn out here, would find it very difficult as well. So that's just something to really keep in mind. History also plays into this. Why do people travel a certain way? I mean, there are natural cutoffs when it comes to canyons for flows of people. There's mountain passes that certainly cut off where people are. There's certain ideologies that reflect differently in different areas, and it's really important to emphasize that. So here's just a little bit more of kind of the Delta County legislative breakup. It's kind of odd. They, of course, I like to jokingly say I irritated someone over in Denver because for both the House and Senate maps, they cut out Delta and Orchard City and kind of the central area of Delta County, not knowing really where I live. So they were probably just saying, well, let's just get rid of Representative Soper once and for all. But that's just my joking humor. Although in politics, you tend to be kind of cynical. Cedar Edge, they throw over with Mesa County. Sorry, I don't know why I keep switching that. I need to leave my hands off the screen. And then they throw Paonia in with Mesa County. To argue that Paonia is part of a community of interest with Mesa County, especially when it'd be almost impossible to travel your entire district on one road, has a lot to be desired. So this definitely looks like gerrymandering to take Democrats from Paonia to try to weaken the Republican strength in Delta and Mesa counties. So let's look at the breakdown in the rifles, Rifle, Silt, and Paonia was added and Delta was deleted. So here we have Rifle, and I don't know if you can see my mouse on your screen or not. I saw some head nods. So we have Rifle here.
Yes.
Then we have the area south of Newcastle and Silt. So this area is also once again kind of odd because, I mean, logically speaking, if you wanted to keep an area flowing, you would go along the interstate and keep some areas intact and compact, because one thing that the law says is that districts need to be compact. It's not really compact when you can't even stay on the same road to be within your district. I'm just telling you this to give you ideas of how to argue and hopefully write a short persuasive speech to send to the commission or testify in person.
So Matt, may I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, you'll give me a chance to take a drink.
Yeah, I posted in the chat a couple of documents. One is the Colorado constitutional language that spells out the factors to be taken into account by the commissions in drawing the districts. And I recommend people download those for reference in the future. The other one was just some notes I took from the Zoom we had a couple of nights ago. Kelly was on that one, I know. Alan Mays was on it. And it's just my notes. There are other notes others might have with some ideas about types of comments to make. But you're making some specific recommendation. Like, this is really great stuff. You know, the thing about the highway or about the employment or whatever. If you could jot down some notes, if you don't have them jotted down already, jot them down later and get them to me. I'm going to distribute them to everybody. I mean, very specific ideas and examples of why maybe the preliminary map is not a good idea and what should be done. I want to get them to people because people don't really know what comments to make. And we have people who are going to go to these. In fact, Eagle is sending 20 some odd people up to Steamboat, I guess this weekend, where they're having a hearing. And so they could use all that stuff. So I'd like to ask you for that when when you're not on vacation.
Sounds good. I'll have time on Sunday. We have a pretty big Lincoln Day dinner. I don't know if you heard, but Lauren and Jim Jordan are coming.
No, I'll be there. Will you be there?
I will be there.
Well, good. I'll see you there. Thanks. But please proceed.
As part of its vacation package.
It's a what package?
I said it's part of your vacation package, man.
Exactly. Yes. I told my wife we'd finish our vacation with a short jaunt down the Palisade Plunge and having dinner with Lauren Boebert and Jim Jordan.